Hello, welcome to the fifth and final part of the introduction to feminist criticism. In the previous four videos, we had looked at the history of feminist criticism in terms of the three waves of feminist criticism, as well as looked in more detail at certain strands of second wave feminism. So here we will look at two important strands of third wave feminism or contemporary feminism, which are black feminism and Dalit feminism. Certain related terms to black feminism are third world feminism or women of color feminism. So these are not exactly the same as black feminism, but they were to some extent inspired by black feminism, or you can say that they are slightly more wider applications of the knowledge that is produced by black feminism. So third world feminism then would apply the idea of race, which was created or which was proposed by black feminism. The idea that race and gender intersect in order to create certain kinds of oppressive conditions for black women. That was one of the knowledges of black feminism that has been related to other third world women, women from outside Europe and America. So that is third world feminism. And then there is also women of color feminism, which is basically a feminism grounded on the experience of women of color. Now, women of color can refer to Asian women, Arabic women, African women, etc., Native American women, Hispanic women, Latina women, all those things. So all women other than white women can be considered women of color, and women of color is sometimes preferred by certain feminists because it is a category of identification rather than a purely biological category. So if you say black feminism, then that is very specifically related to African women or African American women. It is almost a biological category because it is based on biological ideas of race. Whereas when you say women of color, then the experiences of black women can be seen in relation to experiences of, say, Asian women or Arabic women or Latina women, etc. Now, the basic ideas behind all these categories of feminism are basically the same. So, black feminism, as well as these third world or women of color feminisms that we're talking about, black feminism believed that mainstream feminism was a solidarity based on sisterhood, the idea that all women are sisters, all women share certain experiences. But it was criticized for not including the problems of black women. Now, this is something that we have mentioned already while discussing the first three waves of feminism. But what is the way in which mainstream feminism is invisible to, or mainstream feminism invisibilizes the problems of black women? This is an example. Mainstream feminism campaigned for women's right to work outside the domestic sphere. Now, this is something we have seen from first wave feminism onwards, that there is always this push that women should not be forced to sit at home and become just mothers and housewives. Rather, they should have the right to go out and work and earn wages, and equal pay for equal work, and all kinds of all the other things, all the other campaign slogans of feminism proceed from this assumption that women do not find fulfillment only in sitting at home, and therefore they should have the right, this is an important term, they should have the right to go outside and work. However, black women say that this has never been an issue for black women, because rather than being forced to sit at home and take care of their husband and children, black women have historically always been forced to work outside their homes as slaves or as servants for whites. So they always had to work outside. So the very thing that white feminists asked for, or mainstream feminists asked for as a right, we want the right to go out and work. Black women were saying that we were forced to go out and work. So that is a difference between their experiences. So they were forced to go out and work for wages, because of which they were mostly unable to care for their own family, their own homes, their own children. Therefore, black feminism was more interested in reclaiming values like motherhood and domesticity, rather than trying to subvert those values like white women did. So, for white women, motherhood and domesticity were not that important. They were saying those are actually patriarchal values and we want to go outside those values. But black women said we never had an opportunity to be good mothers or to be good wives or to take care of our homes, and we want the right to take care of our own homes rather than taking care of other people's homes. Even before black feminism emerged as a term, black women or African American women had started critiquing mainstream feminism. This is something that you can see mostly in America. So we have already mentioned the speech, Ain't I a Woman, by Sojourner Truth, a black woman, that was delivered in 1851. We mentioned this when we were talking about the early beginnings of feminism and how those were questioned by certain black women, like Sojourner Truth, who was a freed slave, and she was talking and she was saying, "You are all the things that you are talking about." She was addressing white women and saying, "All the things that you are talking about are about your own experiences. You are not talking about my experiences. So, does that mean that I am not a woman?" Then later in 1892, Anna J. Cooper, another African American woman who was also a freed slave, Anna J. Cooper wrote a book called The Voice from the South. It is considered to be one of the first written works by an African American woman. One of the first critical works written by an African American woman. And in this, she critiqued the elitism, racism, and provincialism of the white women's movement. She said the women's movement is a white women's movement. It is elitist, meaning it is mostly about the concerns of upper class women, elite women. It is racist because it is mostly about the concerns of white women, and it is provincial because it is only talking about women from certain areas, especially in North America, and you don't understand the problems of black lower class women from the south of America, from the southern states. Then later, some of the important black feminists who came into prominence during the second half of the 20th century were Angela Davis, Bell Hooks, Patricia Hill Collins, Audre Lorde, and Alice Walker. So, when Bell Hooks, you have to keep in mind that her name is written without a capital letter at all. So, just like the poet E. Cummings that you may be familiar with, Bell Hooks, the black feminist, writes her name without a capital B and a capital H. Actually, Bell Hooks is a pen name. It is an assumed name that she takes up. Her real name is Gloria Jean Watkins. Gloria Jean Watkins, but she is better known as Bell Hooks. Then, the some of the most important key concepts in black feminism are double oppression and intersectionality. Double oppression basically just refers to the idea that black women are oppressed doubly, they are marginalized doubly on the basis of their race as well as on the basis of their gender. So they are oppressed by white men and white women because they are black, and they are again oppressed by both black men and white men because they are women. So that is the concept of double oppression. Then intersectionality we have already mentioned in the previous video as an aspect of third wave feminism. Intersectionality is a way of taking this concept of double oppression forward by saying that it is not just these two things. So double would be to say that there are two main axes of oppression, that is race and gender, but intersectionality says that there are many intersecting lines related to your identity, and these include not just race and gender but also class, sometimes in the case of India for example caste, religion, community, nationality, and many other things, sexuality. All these things can be actually different axes on which, or different lines on which women can be oppressed. So usually the oppression faced by any particular woman, especially a woman of color, is usually as a result of these intersecting lines. So it is usually not just a single oppression or a double oppression, but because of many intersecting levels of oppression or marginalization. So these are double oppression and intersectionality are some of the important concepts of black feminism. Then some of the important writers are Bell Hooks, as we mentioned earlier, and she has a work called Ain't I a Woman, which is a critical work about black women and feminism, published in 1981. And the title, as you can see, is inspired by Sojourner Truth's speech, Ain't I a Woman. Then there is a very interesting book that is co-edited by Gloria T. Hull, Patricia Bell Scott, and Barbara Smith, which is called All the Women Are White, All the Blacks Are Men, but Some of Us Are Brave. So this is a book in black women studies or black feminist studies, and the title is very interesting. It says All the Women Are White, because when you talk about feminism you are assuming that all the women are white. So feminism only talks about white women's problems. All the blacks are men. When you talk about blacks, generally you're talking only about the problems of black men. So the black movement is patriarchal. Feminism is racist. The black movement is patriarchal, but some of us are brave, and this some of us refers to the black women. We don't fit under either of these categories. Because we are not white, we do not fit into feminism. Because we are not men, we do not completely fit under the black movement either. We are marginalized by both white women and black men, but still some of us are brave. That is the idea behind this title. Then again, some other important works include the non-fiction work titled In Search of Her Mother's Gardens by Alice Walker, who's also a famous novelist, and another book called Black Feminist Thought, which is edited by Patricia Hill Collins. And it is Alice Walker who, in this book, In Search of Our Mother's Gardens, which was published in 1983, Alice Walker coined this term called womanism to refer to a new kind of feminism, but a feminism that is more sensitive towards the problems of black women, which comes from the experiences of black women and other women of color. This would be a feminism that fights against not just sexism, but it fights against both racism and sexism. And she uses this very famous phrase, womanist is to feminist as purple is to lavender. Womanist is to feminist as purple is to lavender, which is to say that lavender is a very more of a pastel shade. It is more of a soft and gentle shade, whereas purple is a much more richer, darker, deeper and intense shade. Now this has two meanings. One, on the face value, if you take it at its face value, it would mean that feminist is like lavender, which means it is related to the issues of white women, the lighter colors. But womanist is like purple, and therefore it is about the richer, deeper, darker colors of the black woman's experience. But it can also mean that just like purple is a much more intense version of lavender, womanism is not against feminism, but it is a much more deeper, richer, and more intense version of feminism, which is much more inclusive. So in one sense, rather than saying black feminism, when Alice Walker came up with this term womanism, it is like saying that, we don't want to be just one other strand of feminism. Rather, we want to reinvent feminism itself and call it womanism, where let us reinvent feminism in such a way that we start with black women's experiences. We start with the experience of women of color. Another interesting thing about womanism is that it is inclusive of both men and women. Even though it is based on the experiences of women of color, still both men and women can become part of this movement called womanism by showing solidarity. So this is a little more inclusive. And womanism incorporates racial, cultural, sexual, national, economic, and political considerations, which is to say that it is intersectional in its very conception. Now, moving on to Dalit feminism. Dalit feminism is a very particular kind of feminism that we see in India. Again, it is not very correct to say that it is a kind of feminism or a strand of feminism or a category of feminism, but rather it is another way of thinking about feminism. And it is inspired by black feminism. So the knowledge is gained by black feminism, the kind of issues they fought against and the kind of problems they had to face, that really inspired and that really helped the evolution of Dalit feminism. And in Dalit feminism also, there is a focus on the double oppression but faced by Dalit women in India. And here it is the double oppression of caste and gender. Just like in black feminism, it was race and gender. Here it is caste and gender. Dalit feminism is considered to be an articulation of the experiences of humiliation, deprivation, and isolation faced by Dalit women, and it argues for a more inclusive space for Dalit women in all walks of life. And it was initially seen mostly in two things, especially in literary criticism. Dalit feminism or Dalit feminist perspective in literary criticism had two initial goals. The first one was to reveal the misrepresentation of Dalit women as victims in the works of early male writers who wrote about caste, such as Mulk Rajanand, Premchand, etc. So these are the early Indian writers who wrote about caste and who also tried to represent the problems of Dalit women. But because these were mostly men and they were mostly upper caste men, they could not really understand the problems of Dalit women, and because of that they only represented Dalit women as victims. So their subjectivity, their identity does not really come out very clearly. So these kind of misrepresentations of Dalit women are criticized by Dalit feminists. Secondly, Dalit feminism also encourages Dalit women to script their lives, particularly in the form of autobiographies, but also in the form of poetry, novels, etc. And some of the early important works by Dalit feminists were actually autobiographies, like Baby Kamble's autobiography, The Prisons We Broke, and Urmila Pawar's autobiography, The Weave of My Life. These were actually written originally in Marathi, and they were translated into English. So here the dates that I am giving you here. Baby Kamble's The Prisons We Broke was first published in Marathi in 1987. It was later translated into English, but the original date of publication in Marathi is 1987. Similarly, Urmila Pawar's autobiography was first published in Marathi in 1988. Then we also have Bama or Bama Faustina, a Tamil writer whose works are also considered very important as instances of Dalit feminist writings. She has her She has many other works, but these are her most famous works: Karuku, written in 1992, and Sangati, written in 1994. Dalit feminism is sometimes also known as Ambedkarite feminism or anti-caste feminism. Now, the one of the reasons for this is that when you say Dalit feminism, just like with Black feminism, it sounds like an identitarian movement, as if only women belonging to specific Dalit groups can become part of this movement. It would seem, after a point, it would seem a little less inclusive. Whereas, if you say anti-caste feminism, just like saying women of color feminism, if you say anti-caste feminism, maybe it becomes a bit more inclusive. It can include Bahujan women. Bahujan is basically what we call OBC, right? Other backward castes or other backward classes. So Bahujan women can also be included in this, and also any kind of women who, notwithstanding their real identity, caste identity or caste location, if they are against the idea of caste, if they are people who fight against the caste system, caste society, the way caste structures our society, then they can be considered anti-caste feminists. And again, it is called Ambedkarite feminism because it is based on the teachings of Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, who was a great Dalit leader and intellectual as well. So the Ambedkarite feminism says that Ambedkar was basically somebody who really considered the issues of women and considered women to be equal to men in all ways. So Ambedkar's ideas can be taken to take Dalit feminism forward, and therefore it can be called Ambedkarite feminism. So the idea is also that these are slightly loaded terms, because sometimes what happens is that when you say that Dalit feminism is something that not just Dalit women can theorize and practice, but rather anybody, notwithstanding their caste location, can theorize and practice this, and it should be called Ambedkarite feminism because it is based on Ambedkarite values. Then anybody, even an upper caste woman, if she believes in these Ambedkarite values and she uses those values, she can be called an Ambedkarite feminist. But this is also slightly controversial because many Dalit feminists also say that it is not possible, it is not that easy for an upper caste woman or a non-Dalit woman to occupy that space of a Dalit woman and say that I will talk about Dalit women's problems, because if you have not experienced the problems that Dalit women experience, then how will you theorize it, and how will you practice this feminism, even if you completely follow the values of Ambedkar, and even if you are completely against caste. So these are the reasons why these terms are a little controversial. Then one of the important interventions in Dalit feminism was by Sharmila Rege, who was actually a non-Dalit feminist. She coined a term called Dalit feminist standpoint. So she said, a Dalit feminist standpoint refers to a standpoint that is based on Dalit women's experiences. But this is a standpoint that can also be adopted by non-Dalits who are, however, ready to reinvent themselves as Dalit feminists. So Sharmila Rage said she acknowledged the problem that it's not so easy for upper caste women to just talk about Dalit women's problems, even if they believe that they are anti-caste. Instead, she said, based on the experiences of Dalit women, we should form something called a Dalit feminist standpoint. So this is a standpoint that can be occupied by anyone. But in order to occupy that, you have to, if you are an upper caste woman, you have to leave behind all your caste identity, privileges, and a lot of things. You have to unlearn everything that has been taught to you by your caste location, and you have to relearn everything anew from the Dalit feminist standpoint. So once you have done that, then you can occupy the Dalit feminist standpoint. You have to then reinvent yourself as a Dalit feminist. Then you can adopt this Dalit feminist standpoint and theorize or practice Dalit feminism. And there are some other non-Dalit feminist critics who contributed to the discourse around caste and gender, especially in literature as well as in social sciences. In literature, Susi Taru and Tejaswini Niranjana are important feminist scholars who theorized the nexus between gender and caste. And Nivedita Menon is another social scientist who also, even though she herself is not a Dalit feminist, but she has also theorized the problems of gender and caste. And their contributions are acknowledged by Dalit women. But Dalit women intellectuals, those who come from Dalit backgrounds, are also nowadays trying to come up with their own theories and their own practices without completely depending on either the Dalit male scholars or the non-Dalit feminist scholars. And there are many Dalit women intellectuals all over the country. But for example, there are people like Swati Margaret and Rekha Raj. Rekha Raj especially is a Malayali Dalit intellectual. She is actually an assistant professor at Mahatma Gandhi University, Kottayam, and you can look up many of her writings in Malayalam and also on social media, etc. So there are many others. This is just a very small introduction to Dalit feminism, but these are some of the most important elements of Black feminism as well as Dalit feminism. With this, I think we can, for now, close the chapter on Introduction to Feminism and move on to other aspects of gender and marginalization. Thank you.